committed one of the worst crimes of our age. And that is why I know it's stressful for Ben, for Grace, for Sophie, Alex to be hauled before the court. But my word, history is going to celebrate them as heroes. Because it is so easy. And I just want to make this point. Did anyone see the photo of the MPs before they went to vote to prescribe Palestine action? They did a photo shoot celebrating the suffragettes. They dressed up as the suffragettes in their colours. Now, I don't want to be harsh on Palestine action here, but the suffragettes made Palestine action look like timid minnows. Like, the suffragettes bombed things. They tried to destroy Glasgow aqueducts. They killed 5 people. They attacked churches. So the MPs who celebrated the suffragettes and then went and described Palestine action because they threw some paint at some planes. What that tells us is quite interesting, actually. It's quite interesting. Because obviously those sorts of politicians in their day, they defamed and attacked the suffragettes. They denounced them as dangerous terrorists and anarchists. And the way history now looks at the suffragettes is very different. And the point I'm making is, it is so easy to be on the right side of history long after the struggle has been won. It's so easy to think you would have been courageous when there are no consequences for what you have done. And all the way through history, every struggle for justice has involved persecution. It has involved the state and the media attacking those who stood up for justice. And the same is today. Whatever happens in these courts, those who have stood up, like all of you here today, you will be vindicated and celebrated by history, just as those who are the architects of this crime will be damned. So that's what we've always got to remember. Have courage, determination, solidarity, and remember, we'll keep fighting to the bitter end. Free Palestine.
Thanks very much, Owen. Keep up your good work. I'm glad that Owen mentioned the vote and the parade in Parliament on celebrating the suffragettes, and he's made the point so well. But you know, if you go to the House of Commons souvenir shop just by Portcullis House, you can buy some suffragette memorabilia, including a cup and saucer set, a tea set, celebrating the suffragettes. It's quite ironic, really. I've got a few more speakers for you, including people representing other organisations in the Palestine Coalition. Stephen Katos is here, and will speak to us in a few minutes. Khaled Abdullah is here, who's also part of that delegation, and we'll hear from them in a few minutes. But I'm really proud to stand alongside our next speaker. As you've heard, myself and Sophie Bolt from CND are now being charged with the same charges that Chris and Ben faced, breach of the Public Order Act. We haven't got a date yet for an appearance here, but we hope you'll come back and support us on that day. So please welcome our sister and comrade Sophie Bolt from CND. The Walthamstow 2.
Thanks so much. It's so great to see all of you. And it was so good that we showed our solidarity and support for Chris and Ben, who have been campaigning tirelessly as part of this leadership of the Palestine Coalition, which has made this movement so strong, so united, and so effective. And we know that that's what's really going on here. That's why this movement is being attacked, because it has been so effective in the face of Israel's genocide and our government's total complicity in it. It's absolutely outrageous attack on a principled, peaceful, and as I say, effective movement against Israel's genocide and for Palestinian human rights. Our movement has been going from strength to strength. And as I say, that is why we are under so much attack. Because look at the context in which we're campaigning. The latest talks for a ceasefire show the extremes of violence and inhumanity of the Israeli state. Over 700 people shot dead by private contractors hired by the US and Israel, supposedly to feed the starving. The so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. How disgusting is that? How despicable is that? That's what we're standing up protesting against. Part of the conditions of the ceasefire is that such an organisation is abolished because it is completely against humanitarian international law. And instead it needs to be replaced by the UN and the International Red Cross to distribute that aid so that people can get the food that they need instead of being systematically starved and then shot to death when they try and get food. This is what we are up against. This is what we are here to expose. And meanwhile, the threats for another bombing campaign against Iran continues. We know that Israel and the US, they want regime change in Iran, and that is still continuing. So there's a possibility that we will have more bombings across the region, which will engulf the entire region and potentially could see a nuclear assault. This is a very, very dangerous situation. So we know how critical it is that we strengthen our movement, that we keep protesting, we keep fighting, we keep defending the Palestinian people, and we keep defending the right for a peaceful, just settlement in the Middle East. Israel is a nuclear-armed, genocidal state that is totally out of control. And the British government is totally helping that. It is completely complicit in everything that Israel is doing. We know that in terms of militarily, we know that in terms of the surveillance flights, we know that in terms of the US fighter pilots from RAF Lakenheath going to support Israel. So that's why our protests are so important. That's why we have to go to these military bases to expose what is going on. We have no choice. We have no choice but to protest because our government is part of committing genocide. It's part of breaching international law. We are on the side of justice. We are on the side of international law. We are on the side of democracy. The government talks about it's there to defend democratic rights against tyranny. We know this is a load of rubbish. A really healthy democracy will allow protest in all its forms to flourish. That's what makes a democracy so rich and so diverse and so healthy. So to be banning us, to be criminalising us, shows that this is not healthy democracy. And so we're standing up for the right to protest on top of all of this. And as I say, we know how serious the threats are. The continued genocide, the possibility of another attack, military assault on Iran, but also we know that Trump's global wars threaten us all. It's a real serious escalation in terms of the threat of nuclear weapons being used. So that's why our protest, the right to protest, in being under attack, is so important that we fight back. So thank you so much for your solidarity. Thank you so much for your support. It's an absolute privilege to be part of this movement. And we will go from strength to strength. We will not be intimidated. We will not be stopped. Solidarity.
Free, 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 free. Okay, I'm really delighted to introduce our next speaker, who has marched with us in so many of the national demonstrations, through rain, through sun. He's always been there. He was even interviewed by the police following the 18th of January. Stephen Cuckold.
As I keep repeating, I was 7 years old during the Holocaust of Hungary. And I was 19 years old and a refugee
from the Hungarian uprising when I came to this country. And what I found here was, by comparison, a peaceful liberal democracy with Prime Minister Harold Macmillan. Um, the UK was just recovering from its imperial adventure in Suez, but which was stopped by a single phone call from the US President Eisenhower. But the situation in this country was relatively peaceful, and the idea of fascism simply was unthinkable then. But I find that it is not unthinkable now. And I am extremely concerned about the direction of travel right now. I want to check back to some of my experiences with this fascism, although I was very young at the time, and even going back to the time before it, because in Hungary, fascism's first racist law started in the 1920s, and it started with capping the entry to university of Jews, and it was um, it was already a racist law and the first one in Europe, but you could live with it. However, incrementally, things got worse and worse. By 1940s, the racist laws were extremely humiliating and discriminatory, um, including uh, removal of all Jews from any kind of leading position, um, complete it's forbidden to enter universities anymore. They were even restricted from later the use of trains. Jews weren't allowed to use trains. And then came the compulsory wearing of yellow stars, having to live in buildings that were marked with yellow stars. Only Jews were pushed into those buildings. And it culminated in deportations to Auschwitz by the summer of 44, something like 400,000 Jews were deported straight to Auschwitz from the countryside. The big towns were much later and spared by and large until much later. I would like to read a short poem from a Hungarian Jewish victim of the Holocaust, a much regarded poet who was called up into one of these slave work battalions that were attached to the Hungarian and German armies, and they were extremely badly treated, bullied, used for digging trenches and taking up minefields. The survival rate was something like 10%. Eventually, this poet, Radnóti, was uh, was shot and thrown into a mass grave. And they found his body, exhumed his body after liberation, and excuse me. I'm trying to. Uh, I'm unable to. But it was this poem was a cry from the heart, explaining how the regime was murderous, and and it was really a warning for future generations. Um, I, this takes us back to this country, where again we can see repression growing, and the danger is that if we don't resist step by step, then we will end up with similar full-blown fascism. If we look at the situation in Germany and the US, we already see much more brutal treatment on a regular basis of all protesters. And we are not quite there yet, but unless we protest vigorously like now and always, we shall end up there. On January the 18th, I was standing right next to Chris Nynam and Ben Jamal because I was part of the delegation, the so-called delegation which carried bunches of flowers, uh, intending to take it to the BBC in protest against the BBC's biased reporting of the genocide and ignoring much of the atrocities. We were stopped, and right in front of me, Chris Nynam was negotiating very peacefully with the police. Then suddenly, from all directions, policemen converged on him and took him down, piled on top of him. It was an extremely violent act, a complete shock to see that. It was totally unnecessary. And I read it as it was a symbolic message to our movement of intimidation and future repressions to come. But like we can hear from Chris and Ben, this intimidation isn't working and it's never going to work. Yes, thank you. I just want to say that we have to, what we can do is to continue with our movement, continue with our demonstrations, not allow the numbers to diminish. On the contrary, we ought to make every effort to keep growing our numbers, because this is about the only thing that seems to be working on our cynical government, who are beginning to be concerned about the electoral implications of our large numbers, as some of the independent candidates and their victories showed. And I think that is going to grow. Further, I think that the Palestinian people are aware of this solidarity, and it does have to keep their spirits up. And I think this is another duty for us to never allow it to diminish. Now, convinced that the end result will be a single democratic Palestinian state. There will be justice for all ethnicities and all faiths, and a completely democratic state. Yeah. It may take a long time, but this will be the end. So, I found the permit. So it's not long, I just read a short stanza. This is the Holocaust victim poet, Nicholas Rock. In such an age I dwelt on earth, when men had fallen so beneath their age that they, unbidden, for their lust would kill, and forming stagger in the tangles of confusion, possessed by tainted creeds, bewildered by delusion. In such an age I dwelt on earth, when spies were honored, and the murderer, the traitor, and the thief were held as heroes. But he, whose zeal, it seemed, lacked voice and violence, would be abhorred as if he bore pestilence. In such an age I dwelt on earth, when he who would protest perforce must hide and know his fist in bitterness and shame. That nation, in its madness, laughed and thought it good to taste such fatal horrors, drunk with filth and blood. Thank you very much. Free Palestine. From the river to the sea.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I'm really glad we found the time. Thank you so much for your continued efforts and endeavours and support for the movement. Um, we've still got no word from inside the court yet. We're hoping that if they're processed quickly, Chris and Ben might be able to come out and join us again. We've still got a few more speakers. One of the things we've built, as well as the mass movement, is a really strong coalition over the last 20 months, a really strong coalition of partners, 6 organisations who've come together to organise the protest, to organise this campaign that can get people on the streets time after time again. People who hadn't worked together before in many cases, but it's been a real testament to the strength of our coalition that those groups have been able to come together and work together. And our next speaker, I'll be really proud to work alongside the Muslim Association of Britain. Our next speaker is Ragad from Muslim Association of Britain.
Brothers, sisters, friends, Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you all. We stand here today in solidarity. We stand in front of the court to demand justice, demand truth, and demand the dropping of all charges against Ben Jamal and Chris Nynam. Their so-called crime is speaking out against the genocide, marching for peace, defending human dignity. Let us be absolutely clear. Ben Jamal and Chris Nynam have done nothing wrong. They are not criminals. They are courageous voices against our government's complicity. And now the system wants to punish them. This is what it looks like when the mask falls off. This is what repression looks like in a so-called democracy. Peaceful protesters dragged into courtrooms while war criminals walk free. While Gaza is reduced to rubble, Britain arms the occupation and prosecutes those who dare to resist it. Protest is our right. It is our duty. And when the law is used to protect genocide and punish those who oppose it, then it is not the protesters who are on trial, it is the state itself. So don't let anyone tell you this is about public order. This is about protecting power. But we are here to send a message back. We will not be silenced. We will not be intimidated. And we will never stop standing against the genocide and those complicit. Our demands today are simple and just. Drop all charges against Ben Jamal and Chris Nynam immediately. Respect the right to protest. This is a cornerstone of democracy. End the harassment of those who oppose genocide and apartheid. They are targeting the movement because of the power we hold, the power of disruption. That's now, let's say, it's not a distant tragedy, but a mirror held up to us all. The state is in panic. It is terrified that too many people are refusing to look away. It's terrified of the millions who have marched, the students who have occupied, the workers who have walked out. And so it lashes out with courtrooms, with arrests, with threats of proscription. But let them come, because history is not on their side. History remembers the professors, not the protesters, not the prosecutors. It remembers those who broke the silence, not those who enforced it. from the suffragettes to the anti-apartheid movement. Every act of justice was once called a crime. We know that this movement that we are part of, the biggest in its history, is part of a legacy of resistance that has always been stronger than any government, any courtroom, any state. And like every movement before us, we will outlive them, we will outgrow them, and we will win. To Ben and Chris, to Ben and Chris, and to all those who resist, you are not alone. You have thousands, millions standing behind you in every courtroom, in every city, every square, in every soul that still believes in human dignity. And to Palestine, you are not forgotten. Your voices echo in our streets in London. Your struggle is our struggle. Remember, protest is not a crime. Genocide is. Free, 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 from the river to the sea. Stop bombing Gaza. Stop arming Israel. Stop arming Israel. Free, 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 free. So our next speaker, I'm delighted to introduce him, is activist and actor Khaled Abdallah, who's been fearless in speaking out against Israel's genocide, apartheid and colonisation, and who we at PSC are incredibly delighted to have as our patron now.
Thank you. Honestly, I feel that today you couldn't write as a tragic farce. Today, as we know, is the 20th anniversary of 7/7, an act of real terrorism. Today, we are also here with Ben, Jamal and Chris inside there, and I was alongside them as I was alongside Sophie and alongside Stephen on January the 18th, on the eve of a ceasefire. 3 months later, when the ceasefire broke, I went on the same day as Stephen to be interrogated by police on what was 3 days after that ceasefire the day after the protest. On that day, it was 3 days after the ceasefire broke. 600 or so people had been killed by that day, 180 of them children. And now we stand on today, the day in which Netanyahu once again is on the steps of the White House. Thousands upon thousands have been killed. Gaza has been brought to the edge of famine, and those starved are shot at. Those starved are shot at while trying to get food. And that was the consciousness that we were holding 6 months ago that brings us here on this day that is a week after the courts of this country stood on the side of the government's right to send F-35 parts to bomb, to continue bombing Gaza. In the week after Palestine action was prescribed, and here we are, standing in solidarity with two of the people who have done the most in this world.
to stand up for what is the core of international law, the duty to prevent genocide. Those two people are two people who have done the most in this world to fight for the duty to prevent genocide. The reason the courts of this country and the politicians, the reason the courts are broken and the politicians refuse to use the word genocide is because if they did, they would be duty bound to enact the things they are not doing, to take the kind of actions that are absolutely necessary, and that we and our movement and the millions of people who have been marching with us month after month across the world are standing up for, because we have a deficit of democracy in our world. As I said at the beginning, this is the 20th anniversary of 7/7, which took place, it started at 8:50 and the last bomb went off at 9:47. And I was reflecting on that as I was coming over here. And so I would like to ask us to hold a minute of silence, because elsewhere in the same absurdity that we saw women parliamentarians stand on the 97th anniversary of the vote for women, all wearing their rosettes, and then going off to vote to prescribe Palestine action. The absurdity of that. And today is a day in which we truly reflect on what terrorism is. And I say this as someone who has played a terrorist in film. I say this as someone who has met and spoken with the families of those killed on United 93. It's heartbreaking to see what is happening to this country. And so I invite us all to hold a minute of silence for victims of terrorism everywhere. And I invite us to reflect in that minute on Britain's role and complicity in genocide and in silencing us as we fight against it. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Chris. Free Palestine.
Thank you, Khaled, and thank you for leading us in that very powerful moment. Our next speaker was also present on January the 18th, took part in the delegation carrying a child's shoe as a symbol of children that have been killed in Gaza. He's been very instrumental in building support for the Palestine movement in trade unions in this country. Please welcome Kevin Courtney, former General Secretary of the National Education Union.
Thank you, Alex. Like Alex said, my name is Kevin Courtney. I was formerly General Secretary of the National Education Union during COVID in the latest spring wave, and speaking out about Palestine on the platforms that you get available to you. I was for a short while the international spokesperson for the TUC General Council, and I think it's vital that trade unions speak out with the question of Palestine. These court cases against Ben Jamal, against Chris Minor, and now against Humphrey Bolt and Alex Kenny are a democratic outrage. They are a part of a pattern of suppression of dissent, started by the Tories, doubled down on by Keir Starmer's government. There are new laws, new interventions into the public space, new prescriptions. They are seeking to bear down on, to control, to reduce vital freedoms.